Hi, I'm Jason Mefford, and you're in the right place to start transforming your career and life with this podcast. I've been in the trenches as an executive leader, and now I'm an executive coach and confidential advisor to executives all over the world. I use a multidisciplinary approach to improve learning that drives transformation by getting to the root cause in a practical, no-nonsense way. I love learning and sharing what makes people tick. You get both education and entertainment, since learning shouldn't be boring, right? But that's enough about me. This podcast is a combination of intuitive leadership, neural influence, and mental mastery to take your career and life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting to improve yourself, develop stronger relationships professionally and personally, make quicker, better decisions, and become a more effective leader, then of course, this podcast is for you because you are going to learn how to manage emotions in yourself and others, avoid burnout, stress, and anxiety, master your mind, get people to listen and take action, and become a lifelong learner. And when you do that, you will have a positive mental attitude, executive leadership presence, and the skills to know exactly what to say and do in any situation. I'm glad you're here. So, let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, in this episode, I am playing an interview that I actually did with my friend Robert Berry on his podcast called The Corporate Quitters. So in this, you actually get to see it's one of those tables turned kind of episodes where actually I am the one getting interviewed by Robert. And we talk a little bit about my experience quitting the corporate world and starting my own company. So stay tuned and let's roll that episode now.
I'm not going to do a formal intro because I'm going to do a personalized one, probably take something that you say and introduce you with a little bit of music over it. So I'm just going to say, our guest today is Jason Mefford. Jason, tell us, what are you doing to impact the world or something like that? And then you can tell us who you are and all that good stuff. Let me get my screen straight too, so that it looks like I'm looking at you. All right. So, all right, let's get started here. All right, guys, today's guest on the Corporate Quitters podcast is Jason Mefford. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, what are you doing to bring a positive impact to the world?
Well, I love that idea of bringing a positive impact to the world, and that is exactly what I'm trying to do. So right now, I mean, I've got several different businesses. We don't have to get into all of it, but kind of the overarching theme with all of the different businesses that I have is actually to help people get what I call career insurance, right? You already know the benefits of having health and life insurance. And the problem is you can't buy life insurance once you're dead, right? Well, it's just like that in your career, right? Sometimes things happen. You get fired, it happens, or you get held back in your career. Well, there's certain things that you can do now that effectively give you career insurance. So it helps you do your current job better. It helps you get that promotion or move on to the next company if you want to, if that's where your career is taking you. Or, like I said, God forbid something happens, you lose your job, you're able to quickly actually turn around and get a new job. So I usually, not as surprising, I have training companies. As a result of that, do a lot of education for people. And I also run executive programs and leadership programs for executives and leaders as well, that really focus on a lot of the things that people normally don't talk about. And there's some different words like intuitive leadership. So how can we make decisions quicker using emotion and emotional intelligence and our intuition to make better, faster decisions? How can we use something called neural influence, where we're actually able to use psychology and things like neuro-linguistic programming to actually help people hear us and get people to take action? And then how do we develop the mental mindset? It's what I call kind of doing your daily push-ups, so that at some point, if that elephant comes and sits on your back, you have the strength to actually push yourself up. So that's kind of what I'm doing now, trying to help as many people as I can with some of those different initiatives.
So as you guys can tell, Jason does a lot. One of the primary things he does is he helps people, period. And Jason spent a lot of time as an internal auditor, and Jason is known as a rock star internal auditor. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I can tell you that it really is true. So can you tell us, how did that come about?
How did the rock star thing come?
Yes.
Well, it was funny. I used to, because a long time, I used to travel the world. I probably have literally over 1 million miles on my body just from doing training all over the world. And I've always loved rock and roll, grew up with it. My mother said it was of the devil, kind of thing. But I loved rock and roll, and I love the whole idea of kind of the counterculture movement that happened with that. And so it was funny because I was actually doing a training someplace in the world. I don't even remember where. And somebody says, if you weren't doing this, if you weren't a trainer, what would you be? And I'm like, I'd be a rock star, out there, playing the guitar and singing. And then I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, why am I waiting for that? Why don't I just become a rock star now? Right. And I was then talking to one of my friends later, and we're talking about risk management. And because I used to bring up and use rock and roll as some analogies for doing risk management. And he says, Jason, you're like the risk management rock star. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm hearing this from a couple of places, so I'm just going to accept the moniker. And I've actually, interestingly enough, been introduced at conferences as this guy literally is a rock star in internal audit risk and compliance, because I've done it. I've been there, done it all over the world, and kind of known for that as well. So yeah, most of the people that I help happen to be in internal audit, risk management, or compliance, but I've got other programs to help people even when they're not in those particular roles.
And I think that is why you are a rock star. So let's piggyback off of this rock star. You said a few things. You said rock star, and you said you have multiple businesses. So talk about the importance of diversity when you are an entrepreneur and you have your own business, having diversity in your business offerings.
Yeah. So this is, again, since I have specifically a risk management background, I've worked really hard to have what are called kind of portfolio revenue streams. So just like, again, if you're investing in the stock market, you don't want to put all your money in Google or in IBM. Necessarily, you want to create a portfolio so that if one is not doing quite as well as the others, you're protecting your risk, right? And so I've kind of done that same thing in how I've developed my different businesses, so that I have different revenue streams, and new, again, we've been through COVID for a year now. Well, hey, I knew 3 years ago something like this was going to happen. So I started earlier in ramping up some of my businesses that were completely virtual, in knowing that at some point I'm not going to hop on a plane and be, jet setting all over the world. Plus, it wasn't what I wanted to do anymore, but it just gives you, so that way, if one business may not be performing as well as others, that I still have that constant revenue stream. And I will give the one caveat though, again, it's hard wearing multiple hats or spinning lots of different plates. And so especially if somebody's an entrepreneur first starting out, don't try to do 3 things at once. One of my coaches told me one time, he used the analogy of building bridges over a chasm. And and he said, Jason, let me tell you why you're going crazy, right? Because I was having trouble several years ago. And he draws that picture. And he goes, here's what's happening. Here's this one business. Here's this business. here's this business. And if you see, right, he was drawing lines over the chasm, but they stopped halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, your problem is you haven't finished any of the bridges. So stop, prioritize, make one of those bridges go all the way across, then go back and work on the other ones.
And that makes perfect sense, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs may burn themselves out because they're trying to do too many things. And when you focus on one, you can kind of figure it out. You'll do some things good, do some things bad, and you'll have lessons learned that you can apply to the other things when the timing is right.
Yep. But then over time, right, that idea is over time, you create different revenue streams for yourself. And again, those can be your business, but also your personal investments as well, right? So that in the event, I mean, like one of the guys that I know, he got cancer. And so he had to pretty much, really back off from his business for about 6 months while he was going through chemo, doing all the other stuff. Now, because his personal asset portfolio was such, even though his business wasn't bringing him in cash, he still had cash flow from his personal investments, from real estate, from some other things like that as well. That's the goal where you want to get to. That's when you really start to have the freedom, is when you have especially residual income streams that are coming in, making money literally while you're sleeping. You wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I earned $5,000 last night. That was nice.
Yes, that is the power of passive income.
It is.
For certain. And so you went from a career doing, and I say this kind of tongue in cheek, boring auditing work.
Boring.
Which it's really not. But you've pivoted to doing a lot of things, because you were just talking about neuro-linguistic programming and all types of things. What does pivoting mean to you, and how important is it to be able to pivot in business?
Well, in business in general, it's tremendously important, because again, you never know what is going to get thrown at you. And so again, whether you call it risk management, whatever you want to kind of add on to it, you can never fully anticipate the events that are going to happen in the future. And the difference between businesses that hang around and businesses that don't is usually their ability to pivot when they need to pivot. And they know when they have to hunker down and just plow through whatever the obstacle is, versus, nope, that obstacle's not worth going through, and so I'm going to pivot, right? And it's interesting, because I don't know if we'll get here in this or not. We could talk for 3 hours probably about some of this stuff, right? But I know you bring up like neuro-linguistic programming, because I mentioned that, psychology. The interesting thing was in undergraduate university, my favorite class was psychology. So of course, what did I do? I got an accounting degree and became a CPA, because that was the safe thing to do.
Yep.
That my family told me to do, right? And I actually had a couple of brother-in-laws that were in the same situation. They're like, don't do what we did. Get something that's actually, you can always have a job. And literally, I could go back now and be a CPA at a firm if I wanted to be. I don't want to be, right? But I have that skill set. I have that piece of my career insurance that if I needed to, I could always fall back on that, right? Or I could fall back on, my dad was a general contractor. I could literally go strap on a tool belt again and go work on construction sites if I needed to, because that's a tool in my tool belt. But ever since, like I said, my undergrad, I've been fascinated with human development and psychology. So for 25 years plus, I've been studying psychology on the side. And now I'm incorporating it more into the businesses that I do, because especially when you take something boring like internal audit, most people don't understand how much psychology goes into dealing with other people. And a lot of people's frustrations, especially in the corporate world, is they don't understand how to use it to their benefit. And so they end up getting to be the corporate punching bag that everybody's taking it out on because they don't have those skills. So that's one of the things that I'm helping people with is how do we get those skills? So I'm no longer the corporate punching bag. I can instead be the one who's actually persuading and influencing and moving people to where I want them to move instead of them shoving me in the corner.
Yeah, and I know you and I, we've talked about that on more than one occasion. And I find it interesting. I actually found some research that confirms that we as people are overly emotional and kind of crazy. And you and I have talked, everybody has some crazy in them. But in all seriousness, the research said that even when presented with facts, people still go off of their emotions. I found a couple of research studies that kind of confirm.
Yeah, there was a big one. There was one out of the Max Planck Institute, and there's been some stuff at Harvard. But no matter how analytical you think you are and how logical you believe you are, 95% of everything you do is subconscious, habit, brain, emotional based. We find logic to support our emotional decisions that we've already literally made 7 seconds before we consciously think about them.
Yep.
Absolutely. And so it's little things like that. When you understand that, now all of a sudden you can start to retrain your subconscious. You can do other things to harness that power instead of always being subject to kind of circumstance and thinking that I'm making this logical decision when you're not. Okay. It was literally decided in your brain 7 seconds before you consciously choose what you believe is a response, but more often than not is a reaction and not actually a response.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons I really appreciate the work that you do, because you incorporate these things in, because you could literally be stuck doing something that you hate if you don't understand these simple concepts that will help you get along better with others. So now you're doing a whole lot to help a whole lot of people, but it didn't start off like this.
No, it did not.
Talk to us about how it all started and how you got to be the rock star.
Well, so I think, again, I mean, with the corporate quitters kind of thing, right? I mean, let's maybe go back and because I broke away from corporate life. I was an executive in a couple of larger companies. So how did I break away? Why did I break away kind of thing, right? Well, I already told you, I got my accounting degree, got my certified public accountant license, and I went to work for 2 of the largest public accounting firms in the world. Did very well there, moved up in the ranks very quickly there. And, at that point, I had kind of gotten in my career to where, okay, the city I was living, I was either going to have to move and go to like the head office and work in what was called professional services or professional, can't even remember it was 25 years ago. I don't remember. But anyway, the corporate, one of the corporate groups, and stay there for a while and then go out and become a partner in another city. And so had to weigh, okay, am I going to do that? Am I going to continue to go that track and become a partner? But at about that same time, actually, one of my clients approached me and said, hey, you know what? We need somebody to start an internal audit department for us. And by the way, we're going to double your salary of what you're making currently. Well, that was pretty easy decision to make, right? So I moved out of public accounting into a large manufacturing company, built up an internal audit department. Once I'd kind of done what I wanted to there, I got recruited by another company to do the same thing, another large manufacturing company. So I went in, built the internal audit group. I was given risk management and ethics and compliance responsibilities as well. So grew up, like I said, as an executive in the corporate world. But I think you want to find out, why did I leave, right? Everything was going great. I had a great salary, and everything else. What was it that caused me to kind of leave that corporate world and do what I'm doing now? And there were kind of three three particular experiences that I had at my last employer that were those, okay, it's time for me to leave kind of thing. And the first one was, and this happens if you're ever an executive in a large company, if you get a new CEO, management is going to change over. Typically 2 to 3 years after a new CEO takes over, the whole executive team is new. And that's just what happens, right? So we had gotten a new CEO. At first, everything seemed fine. I was liking what he was saying. Everything seemed to be good. And then one day he comes down. I was reporting to the CFO, and he came down to my office and he closed the door. And I'm like, okay, when the CEO walks into your office and closes the door, something's not good, right? But you don't know what it is. And so he said, well, we just let the CFO go. And it was like, holy crap, right? This was a big shock because I'd worked with this guy for 5 or 6 years, was literally probably the best boss that I ever worked for. And so I tried to push a little bit, ask some questions, why this person was being let go. And the only answer was he wasn't the kind of CFO that I wanted. And at that point, I kind of did one of those, oh shit moments kind of deal, right? Where it's like, because the CFO and me had a lot of similarities. And so that was the first inkling where it's like, if he didn't like the CFO, maybe he doesn't like me for some of those same reasons. But again, one off, you just keep kind of going on, right? The second real experience, and I think I've shared this on some trainings before, but it was, again, new executive came in, new general counsel. We were having a meeting where she was really jockeying for taking over some of my responsibilities and pretty much telling the CEO and all the other executives that I didn't know what I was talking about. Now, she wasn't right. She wasn't informed in it, but I did not have the skills at that point to know how to deal with a political landmine like that just got thrown in front of me. And so I remember going out of that meeting, and it was up on our executive level. I had to, walk down a couple of stairwells to get to my office. And I just remember kind of being in a fog after that meeting and walking into the stairwell and all of a sudden just freezing up and leaning up against the wall. I could smell you can smell that concrete and steel smell that you get in the stairwells. And I knew I had to get out of the building, but I couldn't move. And realize, at that point, okay, I'm having a panic attack. And I could just feel everything coming in on me. And that's not how you're supposed to feel at work, right? So that was number 2, where I kind of knew, okay, this maybe isn't what I need to be doing, right? So once, twice, okay, third time was just delivering my message. We were having an executive leadership team meeting. And so, one of the executives was responsible for doing the agenda, sending out all of the stuff in advance. And I was one of the things on the agenda. So he sends out this email, looks like everybody's copied because it's, everybody in the meeting was copied. So I did a reply all and put the report in the email to say, here's the report that I'll be discussing as my agenda item. Did a reply to all, and then show up in the meeting. And we get to my point in the agenda. And man, you're bringing up memories, man. So we get in that meeting, we get to my agenda point, and I start talking about the report. And all of a sudden, the CEO looks at me very angrily and said, how come I wasn't given that report before the meeting? And I said, what do you mean? I replied all to the email that went out. Well, he put everybody on the email except the CEO. And I didn't go back and check it, right? I just did the reply all, but there was a visceral change in the tone of that meeting and the way that the CEO dealt with me from that point on. Because one of the things, and again, it wasn't criticism to him, but it was at that organization, certain groups of employees felt this way, other groups of employees felt differently. And there was a big difference, and some of it related to executive team leadership, which he was taking means me, the CEO. And so not only feeling the anger and everything in that meeting, from that meeting on for the next year, he treated me completely different. I was reporting to him at the time. Month or two later, I was no longer reporting to him. He brought in somebody else as a CFO that then I was reporting to. And it was a totally different thing. And I knew at that point, but I was an executive. I knew what other executives were getting paid out when they got let go. And so I had to hang on for the rest of the year for my corporate severance package, but knew that my head was going to be on the chopping block. It was just a matter of time until I got called in and told what it was going to be. And sure enough, last day of the fiscal year of that next year was my last day at that organization.
And isn't it odd how oftentimes the corporate workplace resembles high school?
Oh, it's high school or grade school. You got the
Yeah.
bullies, you got the popular kids, you got the athletes, the cheerleaders, the nerds. It does, because it's all human dynamic. It's the same.
Yeah, because the story you tell sounds like one where there was a simple communication error, but then there were also people who didn't like one person and decided that they were going to have it out for everyone else that this person was associated with, and they were going to create unnecessary chaos.
Yep.
And that unnecessary chaos caused you to have a panic attack.
It did. Caused me to lose my job. Right.
Yeah.
And the nice thing too is, even though I knew it was coming, it was at the same time. I mean, I got nailed within just a couple of months. Divorce, layoff, moving, all kinds of stuff, right at the same time. Now, at least I had the benefit or the foresight to know that it was probably coming, and I chose to hang on because I knew what they were going to have to pay me would help me to actually do what I really wanted to do, which again is helping people in this way, teaching people. I've always loved to do that. I've always, like I said, the psychology, the human development, personal development kind of stuff that, I just had to wait and put up with it for a year so that I knew I could walk away with that.
And now you had a lot of life events, critical life events, all happen at one time. How did you overcome that? And how can someone else, what advice would you give, I guess is where I'm better going with this, to someone else going through something similar?
Well, and, like I said, I mean, that was several years ago. And one of the reasons why I do what I do now is I don't want people to go through the same thing that I went through.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have some of the skills. I didn't have the mental mastery that I have today. Right. And so again, a couple of years ago, a lot of life events hit me within the 1 year as well, but it didn't affect me the way it did before. Right. So back in the corporate world, I had high blood pressure. I mean, I wasn't overweight. I was fit, I was healthy, but I had high blood pressure. I was on depression medicine, for a while. And I'll tell you, even though as hard as it is to get fired from your job and go through a divorce, when both of those things cleared, I didn't need either one of those medicines anymore.
Exactly. Yep.
And then I could go about actually, working on myself again. But, you know, there are things, and like I said, that's why I do a lot of what I do. That's the mental mastery part of the leadership program that I do, is to help people understand how to be resilient and how to deal with their emotions and work through, and tools you can actually use so that hopefully, you know, and again, everybody is different, but probably the majority of people that are on things like antidepressants don't need to be taking those drugs if they have the tools to actually do it themselves. And those tools are out there. You can do it without medication if that's what you want to do.
Absolutely. And I think I just lost my entire train of thought on that one.
That's all right.
Well, no, your story is one that is replicated every day across the world. And now that you've been through the things that you've gone through and you've developed tools to help you cope, and now you're developing tools, or you're teaching other people how to cope, it's almost like you found your purpose.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't tell people this a lot, but you know, there's a deeper meaning and purpose behind what I do. And so, you know, a lot of people might look at me and say, "Oh, well, you know, you own a training company. You're, you know, doing audit training or risk management training." Yeah, but I'm doing so much more than that, because by doing that, I'm helping people kind of get out of the fear and anxiety that they have as well. And like I said, I mean, kind of going back to that career insurance idea, helping people get those skills makes them more marketable. So if something happens, they have options, right? And at that point, you know, like I said, I knew it was coming. I could have started looking for another corporate job, gotten another position, and moved on in that area. But again, I kind of knew that wasn't what I was supposed to do. As a little kid, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was the nerdy kid reading Forbes at 12 years old, right? And it just took me a while of getting, excuse me, sidetracked a little bit, but it wasn't really even being sidetracked, because the experiences that I had have helped me to be who I am today, and has given me the power and the tools to be able to help other people, because I've gone through the same stuff that they've gone through.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a very important point to make. You didn't necessarily get sidetracked. You were being groomed for what it is that you do now the entire time. I mean, if you had gone to school and gotten a degree in psychology, you may not have ever faced any of this. You may have faced some other stuff, but
Right.
you may not have ever faced any of this. And a lot of times I ask people about passion versus purpose. And I think we just talked about purpose was the thing that you found, and your purpose is helping others. So I really like the progression that you've had, because you find some people, they leave and they flounder for a little while, and it's all about the money. I think when you put that aside and find the purpose, the money will come. Can you talk about that? Has that been your experience?
No, it has been, and there's been. I mean, obviously, I'm still human. I'm still learning. So nobody listening here think that Jason is a Greek god or something like
But
that.
you are a rock star.
I'm a rock star, but not a Greek god, right? But you know, and I've struggled with this at different times in my life as well. I mean, there's some times when you do chase the money, but yeah, from my experience as well, if you can separate the work from the money, that is the best way to live. Serve enough people and have programs, have revenue generating activities in the way you're helping people. Because again, you know, none of us can work for a charity unless you've got, you know, donors that are supporting and paying your bills. So you still have to, that's one thing that sometimes people think is, well, you know, my purpose is to help people. So I'm just going to help people for free. Well, you can't help people for free for very long, right? But if you focus on helping people, the money comes if you have a business set up and you have revenue generating activities, because it's an exchange, right? I help you, you pay me money. That's how you help me. That's how you give back, right? Because there has to be a give and take, a reciprocity in life. It's a universal law that if you don't, karma comes and kicks you in the butt. And again, I've seen that in my life. I've seen that in the lives of other people as well. But that's one thing that one of my mentors taught me is he took a piece of paper, and so you can do this too. Take a piece of paper, turn it landscape, right? And draw two big, squares on it. And then write money in one and work in the other. And try to, again, just have that mindset that if I focus on, serving people, the money is separate from serving people. And I mean, I'll tell you, there's been some times I've worked my ass off for very, very little money. And there's other times when literally, like I said, I've been asleep, or I've done 5 minutes worth of work, and $5,000 will show up, right? So the amount of money and the work, right? The work that you put in does not necessarily equal the money that you get. And hard work does not necessarily equate to money. In fact, the hardest working people in this world make very, very little money.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So it's two different concepts, but again, we could go off the deep end on that woo-woo wise if you want to. I don't know what your audience is going to be like. So we'll just kind of stop there. But it's when you are doing something with a purpose, your life is totally better. Money doesn't buy happiness, but being happy attracts money.
Yes, absolutely agree. And I think that is the perfect way to end this. I want to thank you for being here. I think you have shared so many valuable lessons with people. But before we go, tell everyone where we can find you. What are some of your signature programs that they may want to check out? And we are going to have all of your contact information and anything that you've mentioned here in the show notes.
Yeah, so one of the areas you can always find me at jasonmefford.com. It's really easy. If you type my name in Google, I'll be 8 or 9 of the top 10. You can find me somewhere from there. That's the easiest way to find me. But my main training company, it's a video on demand learning platform. It's C-Risk Academy is the name of that company, and it's ondemand.criskacademy.com. But then some of the other stuff that I do for executives and leaders, I run a thing called the Briefing Leadership Program. So it's intended to be something that's brief, 15 to 30 minutes a week. You learn something and then you practice it that week. We have group calls, along with that as well. So this is set up for people who, want to learn more about that intuitive leadership, neural influence, and mental mastery that I talked about before. That's really kind of what the Briefing Leadership Program is for. And then I do run an executive forum for just chief audit executives. So the people who are the top internal audit person in their organization, we have a kind of a separate exclusive little group where it's just those people that we work with and have monthly calls, as well as I do coaching with them one-on-one as well. So that's kind of the main stuff. I do a whole bunch of other stuff too, but that keeps me and the team busy already as it is. So.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, thank you again. And hopefully some people will contact you if they need to know more about your services. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
All right.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you enjoyed the most about the podcast and you may even be featured on a future episode. When you're ready to turbocharge your leadership development, join the Briefing Leadership Program, where you get access to everything in one place and can interact directly with me in the group. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy's video on-demand learning platform at ondemand.criskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you will also have access to hundreds of video on-demand learning opportunities. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.